Like the best chatbot experience I ever had was I was in Atlanta, one of my least favorite airports in the United States, and my flight was canceled. And I learned it from a text message that included a button to rebook 3 possible flights. And I think that is the best example of chatbots where it's just like, hey, it's me, automation. You can go wait in this 20-minute line or call someone, or you can press this button and I'll book you now and you go have a beer,
Right.
We're going through something absolutely historic.
Technologies across the board are growing exponentially.
It's a disruption that's going to completely redefine the way businesses compete.
In the next decade, we're going to lose 40% of today's Fortune 500 companies.
The exponential growth of computing is continuing.
AI is nowhere near its full potential.
Whether you like it or not, that the future cannot be stopped by anyone.
Welcome back to Future Tech and Foresight, the podcast where we explore what's next for work, society, and the human experience in a world shaped by intelligent technology. In this episode, Marc is joined by Peter Swimm, a leading expert in conversational AI and the founder of Toilville, to break down where automation and chatbots are actually delivering value and where they're falling short. Peter shares his early experiences with chatbot frameworks, including his time leading product at Botkit and Microsoft, and explains how AI went from scripted FAQ bots to today's multi-modal agents. But don't let the hype fool you. Peter emphasizes the critical limitations of current AI tools in customer service, particularly when it comes to privacy, accountability, and actual usefulness. Together, Marc and Peter explore what makes a chatbot actually good, how AI agents should be designed to support, not replace humans, and why context, personalization, and flexibility matter more than ever. The conversation also dives into real-world examples from banking, healthcare, and enterprise AI rollouts, as well as the nuanced ethical questions emerging around AI's growing role in business and society. If you've ever wondered why so many chatbots frustrate you or how we can do better, this one's for you. About today's guest. Peter Swimm is a veteran of the conversational AI world with over 25 years of experience translating complex technologies into usable tools. As the founder of Toilville, he helps organizations implement AI in a way that preserves institutional knowledge and respects human expertise. Peter's background spans from organizing global music festivals to leading product strategy at Botkit and Microsoft's Copilot Studio. Through his work in startups and enterprise environments, he's helped shape the modern landscape of AI agents, chatbot frameworks, and human-centered automation. His mission: build AI that works for people, not the other way around. Hi, Peter. Thank you very much for joining the podcast today. I'm very much looking forward to talking about one of the things that keeps coming up on the podcast because everybody likes to talk about it, AI, agents, and kind of the future of where we're going. So very much looking forward to jumping into it. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me, Marc.
Yeah. So the way that I like to start off all the conversations with my guests is to get a bit of a more personal sense of how you got interested in artificial intelligence and the things that we're going to talk about. Was there like a certain moment, or was it just kind of like a natural, organic progression into doing the work that you're doing?
It's kind of one of those things that was an organic progression, but looking back, there was a couple pivotal moments, and I think it probably goes back to I began my career in tech in early stage startups, and so employee number 4 kind of roles, and people in tech know that at startups you wear multiple hats, so you do one job, but you got to cover for 18 jobs. And so one of my roles was covering our support and communications and stuff like that. And I was getting at the peak of our popularity. Our product was covered in Mossberg, and the New York Times did a thing on our product. So we were exploding popularity, pretty impressive for 2006. And so I was getting hundreds of emails a day, right? And I was just drowning in it. And that's why I started looking into automation for these tools. And the automation was simple then, it wasn't driven by AI. It was just kind of here's all the boilerplates, and I as a human am steering the ship, and I go in and I change the beginning or change the end. And so I'm doing 800 emails a day, right? All by myself. And I could still do all my other work because it wasn't my main job. And that was kind of a revelatory experience for me of like how technology can amplify the job you're trying to do when the job you're trying to do is complicated by the jobs you're not interested in doing, or they're
Right.
not the main part of your role. And so a couple years later, I had the opportunity to start working for a chatbot framework company called Botkit. And Botkit launched with the Slack API. And Slack API was a very important thing for Slack because they had like this usage, but you couldn't really do work with it. It's a place to hang out. But it wasn't until the API came along that you were able to like truly integrate it into your work processes and have it do things. And chatbots were like the method to do that, right? Because they didn't have UI or buttons or anything, but you were able to like connect a chatbot and say words to it, and it would like reboot the server, right?
Right.
And through that role, I have kind of like before I worked as a product owner in one vertical and one industry at a time. And from that point on, I was in every vertical in every industry, you know, doing my
Mm.
products and, and eventually every modality, right? Because it became more than just like in Slack, but on the phone and over video and all that. And so for the last 10 years, I've been working conversational AI as a product owner, as someone who's working with people building stuff. And people were like, well, I wish I could just have you come and help me build a bot. Right. Or is there, it's so hard finding people like you. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm a person like me. And that's why I started my own consultancy, where I'm just kind of going out and saving people from who've fallen victim to the hype, or early adopters who are paying the price, and people who are being a little more cagey about it, who want to like de-risk the rush to like AI size their business process in a way that doesn't hurt the business and doesn't like cause them to go down a 20-month rabbit hole of like learning how OpenAI API works, which isn't their job.
Right.
Like they want to do the work. So
Yeah. Yeah, they want a solution. They don't want to necessarily learn how to get to that solution, which could take a certain amount of time. Um, One of the things that you said I thought was pretty interesting in how it's going to connect to everything that we're talking about. So you said in 2006 you created this, uh, should we say like slight automation for your emails, which sounds like it was phenomenally beneficial for you to be able to do those 800 emails a day as well as all the other stuff. Now we're moving into what a lot of the guests that come onto the podcast talk about, like a sci-fi future type of
mm,
present. um but could you put this into context, maybe from like 2006 automation to like today's automation? Like what's the
yes.
what's the scale, or what's the scale of magnitude of difference that we're actually able to see today? Because I think we're going to talk about what's happening tomorrow, but to kind of put this into context for people today.
Well, I think if you think about it, all computer science is an abstraction of reality, right? So
Mhm.
even going back to like writing a command in a terminal or typing in a website, you're like taking a wish and you're turning it into something a computer can understand that
Mhm.
executes a process. So
Mm.
I think what I was doing then was automation, and the tradition of that goes back decades. And I think treating these AI things as anything, uh, a evolution from that is probably a mistake, right? Because we're still
Mhm.
just like explaining problems to computers and hopefully they output the answer, right?
Mm.
Um, and I think what's changed between 2006 and now is all you know, the Wizard of Oz is talking behind a microphone and he's doing all this stuff that looks like magic, but it's automation. And the front of the house has this impressive presentation. The back of the house is a guy pulling on levers, so the mechanical Turk is still there. What is happening is that translation layer is getting more and more sophisticated where you need less and less of the G-jaws to make that happen. Right.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I couldn't talk to a microphone that hooked up to my bank and to explain a banking problem and have it figure out the answers and
Mm.
do that without escalating to a teller or bank manager or whatever. And now almost can, and I think
Almost. Yeah.
I can like the FAQ bot that we've been selling since probably 2010 is now like almost real. Like it's
Mhm.
pretty real if you are have a person who's socially engaged with the promise of what it is and follows the directions and asks correctly and is uh able to like speak fluently in the language that it was designed for and it's tested and all that. You can find out office hours. You can
Right.
find out like all the things that really shouldn't bother a person with because it is on the website or somewhere. And what we're getting into now is that sophisticated uncovering of like, and you see this like if you watch kids do search engine, like they'll type in like, SpongeBob SquarePants space, Roblox, Flash, whatever. And so we're getting into that world where you kind of describe what you want and you get the output you expect, but it's also creating it. It's not just like finding it, but it's also like compiling and generating for you real time. And so, yeah, there's a lot of questions about that and like the ownership of that. But like, we're kind of getting to like, this is the sci-fi vision of like, if I write like product owners are used to writing specs, I can describe my spec and the application happens, right? And
Yes.
and I think that's kind of like where people salivate and dream, but it's still kind of like lead from gold in a lot of cases.
Mm. Yeah. So one other maybe contextualizing question before we jump into other things. And this is something that I've been talking about a lot with some of my clients and obviously some other people on the podcast where like this FAQ bot that you said 2010, right? That you've had this. Obviously many other companies out there and many websites have this FAQ bot out there.
Yeah.
Is so the general masses, if you will, are really accustomed to that kind of experience when you go onto a
Mhm.
website, for instance. And I'm just using this website example, but you can kind of broadly apply this across most different products, right? That's the kind of state of these bots, if you will.
Mhm.
The newer versions of these bots, as you were describing, are much more sophisticated, but I think that there's like a cultural lag or like an awareness lag where people are thinking, oh yeah, it's just, it's some AI bot, but I've been so frustrated with these, bots over the last 10, 15 years. I still don't trust these newer kind of bots. Do you think that there's going to be like is there going to be a pivotal point, like a pivot point, or is it just going to take some time for people to have this bad taste of these old bots leave their minds before they kind of accept, okay, these bots on these new websites are actually fantastic.
Um, I think the experiences have to prove themselves to the people at first, right? And they haven't done so. So,
Mhm.
like the criticism they receive is deserved, right? And I think one, you have to show people um, that's adaptive and flexible and can solve problems quicker, and you have to give people skin in the game to see their success happen, right?
Mhm.
So like, like when I talk to the front desk at a hotel, the person greets me and they set the social scene up and how can I help you? And you understand the contract that's going to happen there, right? And co-pilots, they've kind of gone too far in the other way where they're so flexible, but they're not as specified for that interaction anymore. That
Yeah.
um, we've kind of like we're lost in the weeds a little bit in terms of our expectations for what they do, right? So like if I went to Hilton and I was checking in and I asked her for advice about home mortgages, I wouldn't expect her to know that, right? But people expect these LLMs to like do everything, and it's kind of like we need to like step back from the marketing and talk about how we can like get back to that what we
Mhm.
promised for chatbots in 2010, but repeatable and effective and more convenient, right? And I think until that happens, people are going to think that they're being palmed off on a thing that is less capable of doing things. And I think that's kind of like the best chatbot experience I ever had was I was in Atlanta, one of my least favorite airports in the United States, and my flight was canceled. And I learned it from a text message that included a button to rebook 3 possible flights. And I think that is the best example of chatbots where it's just like, hey, it's me, automation. You can go wait in this 20-minute line or call someone, or you can press this button and I'll book you now and you go have a beer, like
Right.
and I think like those experiences we really have to win over the users of these products. And then on the other end, we have to really win over the domain experts of these products, where they're in the care of feeding and making sure that they speak the right information. And it's taking heat off their back from answering all those questions about, what time does the thing open and get more to like the things that they're good at solving, which are like complex scenarios of like, oh, I need to arbitrate my mortgage or my health plan or, personal advice or whatever. And
Mm.
I think once all those three things start working in a beneficial to all parties environment. People are going to see chatbots as a lower grade experience for everything, like because like everyone wants to have a person who on the inside who they can call and get preferential treatment. And
Hmm.
if the chatbot was that, then people would like them. Yeah,
Yeah.
like what there's that chatbot that fights your parking tickets, right? And
Right.
and so like you just put in your parking ticket and it just files paperwork until the ticket is resolved. And of course it got killed for whatever reason. They I think it was a funding thing or because no one wants to fund things that actually work or make people happy, right? They want to fund things that are like capture the $200,000 they're spending a day on contact centers and stuff. So,
Mm.
that withstanding, I think people, there hasn't been a very public use case of things like working well for all three of those actors in the conversation, which is like the business
Mm.
owner, the business worker, and the customer.
So is this a tech problem? Is this a marketing problem? Is this a um engineering problem? Like what is holding this back from getting us to this promised land, shall we say?
The answer is yes, right?
Yeah.
Because you asked all the stakeholder problems, and
Yeah.
like the first problem is like most people, and by people I mean organizations, don't have a good sense of the types of problems they're solving at what degree across the board of all the problems that they solve, right?
Mm.
You can ask them like for their opinion and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I really hate uh user identification or looking up their account or whatever." And you can find those problems and solve them. But they don't know like I've had customers who build a chatbot and for like a retail and the chatbot could not issue refunds, but it had topics about refunds. And so it answered questions about refunds and it got very, very low scores in terms of user feedback and all that because it didn't do the thing that people wanted it to do. So it didn't matter how well it was at doing its job of answering the question. If the answer is a shitty answer, pardon my French, is like people are going to say that's awful experience versus like my example of like booking my flight. That's great. It's like truly easier than even loading up the app, right? And
Yeah.
so I think those are the lost opportunities in a lot of these automations where, yeah, you can wait in line for 20 minutes and talk to a person, or you can pick up your phone and pick three options and go sit down, you know.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, very interesting. Do you see already kind of a reshifting towards this of like to me it sounds like it's practical solutions rather than getting lost in the ability to explain everything. Is there already a shift happening or
Yeah, I think so. Like I think if you look at like the industries that are super compliant, right? Banking, healthcare, that's what exists today, right? Like if you talk to a healthcare chatbot, it doesn't talk to you about like why am I on ephedrine or why am I doing this or why that. It gives you to the doctor and whatever for that. But it answers like all the other questions about like, how do I contact the surgery department or everything that's administrative and uh,
Mhm.
records of things you talk to. And I think that is kind of a reflection of one, de-risking a problem for them. They can't claim HIPAA compliance with a lot of these tools. And the other thing is just kind of like an acknowledgement of like not everything's automatable. I think, we have Dr. Oz on TV saying that everyone's gonna have a virtual doctor. And I'm like, I'm sure it's not everyone. It's gonna be everyone on Medicare is gonna have a virtual doctor, and everyone with Blue Shield, Blue Cross, Premium Plus Pro will still have a regular doctor. And
Mm.
I think people are very like aware of that and suspicious of that outcome. And so that's why there's always the skepticism in adopting these products because they know like things never get cheaper and things are
Right.
never going to be easier than what they have today. So I think, and I think they're right to push back, you know.
Hmm. Hmm. Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, maybe with that, so you're talking about these type of businesses. Are there other ones that you've seen like some successes with like implementing chatbots to, a certain degree or other?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of things are like I work a lot with insurance companies and so anything that is like involving filling out forms or like collecting information. Contact centers, like I worked with one contact center, and they had 200 people uh, answering for the healthcare of a company whose insurance plan is bigger than 13 American states Medicare's. So like, so basically you're like a government agency level of healthcare. And the average call length was 2 minutes and 45 seconds. And the average, uh, the number one reason of the first minute 10 was user verification. And so
Right.
that is a completely valid automation thing that you shouldn't waste time with a person to do, because they're just calling to find out where their W-2 is or why their claim was rejected or whatever. And And so instead of like getting rid of the 200 people, you've now doubled it to 400 people because you cut the call in half, right?
Right.
And I think
Right.
those are kind of like the outcomes that people are looking for. Where it's good
Mm.
for the person, because they could be on the call and they can take care of all that information sorting while they're waiting, as opposed to listening to like the worst music in the world on loop. Um, and then when they get to the call, we can get to the meat of the problem. Uh, and then the people on the other end, they're not like looking up people's addresses and reading it back to them, 180 times a day. And and I think, working smarter, not harder, is a lot as a way of unlocking productivity, reducing, the cost of doing things, because they know how much these things cost. They know, like, every time I have to talk to a person for my health plan, it's $5, right? Every time I talk to ChatGPT, it's 385. So, and the margins are maybe artificially thin because ChatGPT is a venture-backed company and they're not paying what the actual market rate of that they're taking the back. So,
Mm.
and I think the promise there is that people will get hooked as the prices go up, and then they'll be in the system. And I think the fact they haven't been able to compellingly get people hooked on the technology puts that whole thing in doubt and at risk. So like there's a lot of things out there that, like, as a person buying these things, you should really like be cautious on like throwing over your entire thing over to like, AI platform or whatever, because what happens when the prices go up 180%? Because they're not going to build calls. They're not going to build the contact centers they said they're going to reduce the prices.
That's a really good point. I guess that goes back to one of your early ideas here of the marketing, which has been pretty substantial, right? Whether it's organic or paid or otherwise. It's really giving this impression that, well, chatbots are here, or AI agents are here, and just give it 3 months or 6 months or something like that, and it'll solve kind of all your problems. You'll have your personal Jarvis, on your computer, on your cell phone, that'll be able to essentially do whatever it is that you need in the digital world. But that's not
Mm.
the case, you're saying.
No, and people have always been saying it 5 years from now or 10 years from now, and it's been a rolling 5 years and 10 years since the
Mm.
2008, 2007, and even further back. And I think what it is like there's things that are possible and there's things that are pleasurable, you know, and so, like, I can make a demo happen. And I think the current age of AI is wonderful for the elevator pitch, because you can like build the elevator pitch in 10 or 15 minutes, but getting it from like 70% quality to 99.999% quality is such a huge moonshot of effort. And
Right.
they're kind of just hand waving their way through it on the marketing side. Like, and they keep announcing the same products every 8 to 10 months. Like, oh, this model reasons. I'm like, you said it reasoned in 2021. It didn't reason in 2023. Like,
Right.
they keep like
Mm.
throwing their goalpost down the line of what is like agentic, what is like an agent. And I think, you know, the question that no one is asking in these things is like, well, what is a employee? Like, what am I signing up for? Am I signing up for a low level automation thing that I hook into a system of people, or am I trying to like, you know, make APIs that talk to themselves and make decisions based on what they observe, you know?
Mm.
And I think
Mm.
the sci-fi of it kind of blurs that line where people just assume they're getting something that was never sold to them in that way too. So the Iron Man feature, it's still like completely impossible, I think, on a
Yeah,
consumer
possible,
level.
but maybe further out than
Yeah.
what we've
And
been told recently. Yeah.
yeah. And if you look at like sci-fi films from the 80s, of like in the year 1994, people have video phones, and they're kind of close. It's
Mhm.
kind of weird and awkward, like they're the 80s version of what the 90s would look like. And I think like the future of it is going to be more like R2D2 than C3PO, right?
Mm,
Where you have a bot that like uh whistles sad when something bad happens and whistles happy when something good happens. And oh yeah, he turned off the trash compactor and saved your life what without you asking. Um and I think people will be happy with that, right? They don't need to have like this parasocial relationship with their personal computer. Yeah.
right, right. Well, I'm sure that'll happen as well with all of these, AI girlfriends and boyfriends and stuff that are coming out. But maybe that's a whole in the discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. Rule 42 notwithstanding, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Um, maybe we can shift here a little bit. So you worked for Microsoft's Copilot Studio.
yeah.
Could you, because I think that's obviously very interesting. Could you touch on that and like what I'm assuming that many of the things that you're saying here are also lessons from, or some lessons are taken from there. Could you, one, explain the experience, and two, kind of like what you got from it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, probably the most interesting thing of working for a product that makes products is
Mm,
one, I think in the presentation of your product, and especially in the closed system, you design things that are like, here's how I want it to be, and here's how I have to make it because I'm talking multiple systems and all that. And when you are a dev platform, you're exposing a lot of those wrinkles to the world. And so there's like a lot of like, you know, for example, Microsoft Copilot uses a lot of its RAG, which is like the way people answer questions based on company data, and they very intentionally are using the ecosystem of Microsoft products because there's answers for all the problems you have when you share data in those tools, right?
right.
Like if I hook up a chatbot to my website and I use my Microsoft account, I don't want it to like use everything in my OneDrive to answer questions because there's private pertinent data in there. So
Right.
my so Microsoft has tooling that as a product owner, you can leverage to like say, okay, this bot will you know, check Mark's credentials, and the bot won't answer questions or documents that Mark can't see, you know. And so those are questions number one for anything in someone who is like a Microsoft person. Like our toughest customer as a Microsoft PM was Microsoft Digital, which is our IT team. Like they're like our pro- that product was blocked for Microsoft customers for a long time, and we're selling it to enterprise people because of lack of tools and stuff like that. And so now that it's unblocked, we can look directly in the eyes of a bank or a healthcare company and say, like, yeah, all the compliance stuff you need is there. And that was kind of like, as a product owner, who's used to working in startup where you fail fast and you kind of overlook things like compliance and all that. Like, yeah, you have to, you know, like my favorite coworker was our legal team, and talking to the privacy team and, making sure that things are like ethical AI and all that. And it was just like, at the end of the day, you talk to the salespeople and they're like, "Oh man, I can't do anything." And it's like,
Mm,
yeah, it's safe. It's like,
mm, mm, mm,
like, and I think LLMs want to be like a sieve for all your information. And on the other side, corporate is about need to know at the time of knowing. And those are kind of in opposition,
mm,
of like
mm.
the quality. Like if you search like Copilot Studio today, like on the Reddit or whatever, the number one complaint is I can't get SharePoint to work. Right. And is that a Copilot problem? It's like, no, it's a SharePoint problem. Like
Mm,
understanding like if imagine your SharePoint is like your parents' addict of like all the things you've written in childhood, and some things are accurate and they're not accurate. And like so it thinks the CEO of Microsoft is still Steve Ballmer because there's a document from 2008 in there. And um that's not a problem the Copilot solves, right? Like that is like, you need to manage your data and you need to make sure it's accurate and cogent because models don't know anything at all. They're just
right.
probabilistically assigning values to things that they find. And so that is like the first real come down, I think, from AI is like everything that is backed by open AI technologies and all that without RAG is like a roll of dice. And has nothing to do with truth or accuracy or
Mm,
safety or anything. Um, but on the other hand, it puts Microsoft in a very good position because they built all those tools for trust and safety and accuracy and all that. Um, but then you beg the question of like, well, if I'm paying $5 to answer a question and it's only correct 80% of the time, you know,
Yeah.
or I could just pay a person who's been trained 350 an answer, like, and I think that's like where they really struggled at like turning these customers who even sign up into repeat and reoccurring customers and stuff like that. And that's why they keep like relaunching their products, rebranding them. Uh,
Yeah.
and because like the problems persist, but they've yet to be solved. You know.
So interesting. Um, you also touched on, which I think is something that a lot of listeners, as well as myself, are very curious about, right? This privacy issues that are going to be coming up with these AI bots. You know, it's I guess on every entrepreneur's or every CEO's top of mind that if you implement some of these, whether it's AI agents or bots or LLMs, because it doesn't really understand like whether this thing should be public or not. Like you need to mark it.
Mhm.
And if it's not marked, you could be sharing your IP with your competitors
Mm.
when you clearly don't want to do that.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's just like, okay, so we'll just put all our public IP in one directory and put our private IP in another, and the chatbot only talk like, and that's how they're solving it. Like they're just like, um, the chatbot, we'll just make them a user on our platform who has this level of permissions, or you log into the bot with your level of permissions, and then we do a search into SharePoint, and then we take those answers and use the LLM to rewrite that into a chatbot friendly format. And so like that's not AI, that's summarization and recapping. And it seems like a lot of work just for like, you know, paying a writer to like just come in and write 30 answers that are good for a chatbot. And then the cost is recouped infinitely in ROI versus like a dynamic process that happens uniquely for every single person that talks to your bot, you know. And so like you're kind of doing the opposite of automation where
Mm.
you're kind of like I'm making a money machine that burns money and prices never go down other than the fact that like I think I can have less employees while doing that. So I think there's been very few use cases of that working out well for anyone, you know.
So this is why you were saying at the beginning, there's the marketing aspect of it, people jumping into using these AI agents, getting burned, and not understanding or having a bad taste in their mouth after this whole experience. And if they had just utilized, somebody like you that understands this stuff properly, they would have had not just a profitable implementation, but they would have had one that would have, you know, actually solved the problem or a problem that would have been properly identified that then could have been solved.
Yeah, I think that first project, anything you do AI should not be a moonshot. It should be how I measure success shot. And so you're gonna pick a hole in one scenario that absolutely will have an ability to affect it. And then you're about only do that. And then you'll measure everything else that it encounters. And each one of those things you'll like as a prescriptive way, or, maybe someone built the AI way of like determining what is the sliding scale of return for all the other problems. Right. And so that gives you two things. One, you have weather forecasting of problems, right? Like we know like everyone's going to call about their W-2 on February 1st, right? So we can plan for that. And Black Friday is in November and all those dates. And you'll find other insights of like, oh, um, the day the stock market goes bad, everyone's calling about their 401k for some reason. And you can do things. You can turn on maybe experimental automations on demand to deal with when the wait time's longer than an hour. And so you could do all kinds of things that are just like, okay, let's not just like it's not a zero sum game of like people or automation. It's kind of like I can spin up resources to assist people and I can solve problems and I can identify problems. And I can
Mhm.
also can measure
Mm.
like I did a chatbot and they found out that one of their coupons was not working because they saw the measurement of complaints for coupon topic went up. And so they looked in the coupon topic and they're like, oh, all these people are mad because this coupon code didn't work. Whoops, we didn't turn it on. Like, so like there's all kinds of like
Okay.
things, like there's all kinds of things that you can learn from these things, even when you fail, right? Like the
Right.
failure of containment is not like a failure of the technology. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, you learned that here's a problem that only the director of marketing could fix by logging into the coupon website and turning on the code,
Hmm.
So
Interesting. Well, maybe we're touching on this next point. I think whenever we're talking about automation and AI agents, the topic of the future of work comes up. Now, I think you touched on this right at the beginning when you're talking about augmentation rather than replacement. Um, do you see individuals across many different organizations being highly augmented even over the next 5 to 10 years and not replaced by by these agents?
I feel strongly that there are some things that you can never replace, and conversely, there should always be a way to like ask for um, human assistance, right? Because if you have a machine that can make a decision and block you out of a right, that's not technology, that's fascism, right? It's like if I like if I'm in a healthcare bot and they deny a claim through automated process and I have no way of like escalating to that handler of that system, then that's a net negative. And I think companies will be pillarized if they launch things like that, and rightly so. That is
Yeah.
that is a bad outcome. And I think what you're seeing in real time is a lot of people effing around and finding out about like these processes being put in, and people are like making riff decisions based on some AI process not transparently, and they're getting they're finding out they have to hire people back at twice their value and stuff because AI made a decision, and it's just like an ounce of prevention could have solved like all these problems. And I think we're probably like weeks or months away from like a huge like doxing or data leakage situation in these devices where people figure out the right way to ask it to get me a list of all the social security numbers that a company owns or things like that.
Right.
And I think that's a very real concern because people don't understand the full impacts of these things because they don't have tools to measure them.
Mm. So there could be quite a big drawback from the should we say the hype cycle for these AI agents, which if I'm understanding everything that you're saying, might be good because then there might be a more nuanced approach to implementing these tools into the organizations, rather than this kind of should we say wild west kind of just jumping into it and throwing it into your organization.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, like it could go the other way. Like I met the engineers who I don't know if you're familiar with Microsoft Tay.
Yeah,
Microsoft Tay.
yeah, yeah. The like it became super racist and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
public
Yeah,
and everything. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And they were proud of their effort. And because and they were like, like some bad apples ruined it for everyone. And I think there's a like lack of self-awareness that the industry can have about these things. That is like, you know, there's a famous slide in the 70s from IBM that says, a machine can never face consequences so much to never make a decision, right? And I think like yeah, like when you call something agentic, you're talking about agency. And with agency, it comes fear, fear of doing the wrong thing. And these things have no fear of doing the wrong thing.
Mm.
And so all they have is the ability to launch decisions, but there's no repercussion. And there's no like do-overs for a lot of these things and all that. And so I think workers and customers and stakeholders at companies really need to argue for transparency and like autonomy in that, or restrict this to all but the most menial task.
Hmm. Hmm. Very interesting. And one of the last questions I asked guests is, about the future. I'm assuming that, say, over the next 5 years, that statement that you just made is going to be still relevant for organizations with these AI agents. Obviously, the AI agents and these chatbots and stuff are going to get more advanced, more capable. But I think, if I'm understanding you clearly, this trend is going to continue.
I think so because like, if we could talk about like if the computer is your wish machine, and so like I say, I want a coffee, right? And so the system has to know the information about me, about where I get my coffee and how I like it and all that stuff. And so to get the future they want, they have to have an index of all your data and all your information. And people are very skeptical of doing that for the right reasons or whatever. Now, this is why Siri and Alexa and all that are still like niche things, because uh, that context is like still debatable, and it's tied in a million different databases, and the databases don't talk to each other without special handshake agreements. And so I think like being able to give simple commands that have complex contextual requirements is the defining factor why these technologies uh, won't work at scale until something figures that out, or we live in some panopticon of where, you know, and I think this kind of argues like who wins the AI war? Is it people like
Mm.
OpenAI, or is it companies like Microsoft or Apple, or is it uh, you know, the government? Like I have like my phone, and 3 gigs of it is reserved for my personal model, and it doesn't leave the phone, but it like can give context of how I like my coffee. So I can
Mm.
say, like a coffee, and then it goes out and finds the agent. Oh, I'm in a Starbucks. So I'll order from the Starbucks and it'll order my coffee, and I'll use my payment method that I always use. And I think that's like when I think AI gets interesting, but also like, it also like Black Mirrors on the other side of that, right? Like, well, who's going to protect this information, and how do we keep it on the device? And, you know, how do we keep bad actors, or how do we keep, even if you have good actors turn bad, like Google taking out
Sure.
do no evil out of their thing on the down low. And like, like I don't want to work for companies that, uh, fire their DEI guys. So I'll take my services off them. And,
Mm.
but if it's the government, I guess I'll move to another country, like
You're right. Right.
it's so there's a lot of questions. And I think these are all like outside even of the ability of the technology that yet to be solved. And so the ability of technology to market forward, but I think like I said earlier, there's a lot of social things that have to be re-arbitrated in the social contract, I think, to make these things work better too.
Sounds like a complicated future, Peter.
Uh, I rather have options than
Yeah. Yeah. True.
no
Yeah.
options. So
Yeah. 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 No, very interesting. Um, I think that's a great place to end things. We'll definitely have your LinkedIn and your website, which it's toilville.com
that's right. That's right.
up on the show notes. Are there any other places that you want people to reach out or follow what you're up to?
No, but yeah, check us out. Every Wednesday we have office hours where I kind of just talk about problems and I work on stuff, kind of like a Twitch stream for people in tech. So like people can check in, and of course I love to talk to people about their problems. So feel free to contact me, and of course I can help in a more involved way if you need it.
Yes.
So
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time. I think you gave a little bit of a, shall we say, you added to the complexities of the modern day, which I think is very useful because it kind of breaks the marketing spell or this hype spell, which I'm very excited about the future with all these things. But
mhm,
if you only have such shall we say, a shallow understanding of what's going on, then you just believe in the niche. You just believe in the marketing all the time, and
absolutely.
it's not necessarily a good thing. So perfect. Well, thank you for that, Peter. Thank you very much for your time. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I'll probably have to have you back in like 5 years to see what happens then.
Yeah, 5 years, 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, perfect, perfect. Thanks again.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye. Well, thanks for listening to this week's Future Tech and Foresight podcast. If you like what you've heard here, there are, of course, a number of ways that you can support the podcast. The best way would be to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or give a rating on Spotify, which you can find a step-by-step explanation for on the futuretechandforesight.com website. Alternatively, feel free to leave a comment either on the episode show notes or the YouTube channel where you can see video recordings of the interviews. And finally, if you are part of an organization that is aware of the disruptive and transformational impact that emerging and future technologies will bring and want to know more, please get in touch to hear about the strategic foresight services that we offer and how we can help future-proof your organization and take advantage of the phenomenal opportunities available to survive and thrive in the future.
A lot of future-shocked people and future-shocked institutions in our society are simply overwhelmed.
Once there is superintelligence, the fate of humanity may depend on what the superintelligence does.
Science fact is catching up to science fiction.
The first truly intelligent machine will be the last invention that humanity needs to make.
The only scarcity that will exist in the future is that which we decide to create ourselves as humans.
Within a 10-year design revolution, we can have all humanity living the highest standard of living anybody's ever known.
Progress is accelerating at an exponential pace, and it's going to reach a point where progress is so fast it's going to be a singularity.
We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens.
Every single headline points to the birth pangs of a Type 1 civilization.